I'm very cognizant of the fact that this is the last panel discussion before happy hour. So we will do all our best to stay on time so that we don't miss that. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. The focus of our panel discussion today is balancing the interests of real estate developers and also the interests of creating sustainable, affordable, and equitable projects in the 21st century paradigm for urban development, and hopefully obtaining a multifaceted approach that includes improving infrastructure, community engagement, public-private partnerships, and preserving local heritage. The benefit of this approach is that real estate investors who employ this multifaceted approach may indeed find that their financial returns are improved by adopting this new approach. And today we have an impressive group of panelists who will be sharing their perspectives on this interesting dichotomy of balancing development interests with the creation of livable communities. So I'd like to start on my right by having Rebecca introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background and what she does, and then we'll move right down the dais. So Rebecca, could you please start us off?
Happy to. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here representing the governor of the state of New Mexico, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. You were fortunate to hear from my colleague, Secretary Rob Black, earlier today. And I serve the governor in her office as a member of her policy team as her senior infrastructure advisor. I've been in that role nearly 2 years. And so I come to this conversation and this topic from a policy perspective. And from a team of folks who are situated in the state of New Mexico to try to do the best we can by our constituents, by our communities in the time we have in leadership. And I look forward to unpacking a little bit more about what we're doing, what that looks like in New Mexico. But in my role as infrastructure advisor in the Office of the Governor, I'm focusing on key infrastructure investment areas such as broadband, clean energy, drinking water, wastewater, transportation. I'm also focused on leaving community capacity better than it's ever been. That's an ambitious charge, but something that is essential if we're going to continue investing in resilient infrastructure. We need communities that are equipped to build, fund, execute projects and maintain their infrastructure. So working a lot across the state with opportunities to really lean in on how we support local communities, municipalities, small water system, our tribal communities. And my background coming into this position is sort of so a framing for you all as you hear from me later in the panel is I come from an environmental protection and sort of water protection background. I worked at United States Environmental Protection Agency for 13 years in DC as a water lead for the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. And then I served the governor during her first term, 2019 through 2022, at the New Mexico Environment Department, where I got to work on, to some extent, on some national and regional issues and challenges around water protection and infrastructure. And so I got hooked on infrastructure through drinking water and wastewater, and I am driven in this role to support communities at the local level. And so this idea of thinking about development through a livability lens really aligns not just with my own personal background and values, but with the work that we're doing in this administration. So again, just so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Gonzalo, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Thank you, and thanks to the NADBank for having us for the first time here in this NADBank Summit. I am Gonzalo Pizzuto. I am responsible in Vinte for investor relations and corporate financing. I've been in the company for around 10 years, almost 10 years. And well, Vinte is a home builder in Mexico. with over 22 years of history. In these 22 years, we have built around 69 homes, and we have presence in 11 states in Mexico, 3 close to the border. And we were born in these 22 years ago as a differentiated home builder back then. We may not have had ESG as a mainstream requirement as it is now, but the focus was in sustainability. We developed a shared value business model where we made sure that all of the stakeholders involved in the business would create value in the long term. This has been a proven business model in all the states that we participate, mainly on our customers. In Mexico, the home, as in a lot of families in the US, is part of the most important asset of a family. So what happens after we deliver a home for us is very important, and the quality of life that our clients have. Since 2008, we have had the support of impact investors, such as IFC from the World Bank. It was the first equity investor in the company as a private company. And then we have also had the IDB from Germany. We have had DEG and Finance in Motion recently. From France, we have Proparco as an equity holder, and also from Denmark, the Denmark Impact Fund. So all of these investors have found the value of the sustainability in Vinte. More recently, we have had the long-term partnership with NADBank. In fact, just in February, we closed a long-term private bond, 9 years, and it is based on all of these infrastructure that we build within the developments. We do master planned communities. This is why our business is very long-term. And also, we do certifications on our homes. We use an edge tool, which is from the World Bank also, but I don't want to take more time. I'll leave for the next question.
Thank you. Bill, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you. My name's Bill Avila. I'm an attorney here in San Antonio, or a partner in a public finance practice at Bracewell. Bracewell is an 80-year-old firm that started at the headquarters in Houston and started in energy and financial industries. And now we have almost 400 lawyers and offices in San Antonio, Houston, Austin, Dallas, Seattle, New York, Washington, D.C., London, Paris, and Dubai. And our firm is very active in every sector of the energy industry and every sector of public finance. My background, I was born and raised here. I left here and I was gone for 9 years. I spent 6 years at the University of Notre Dame studying economics. I got a BA and an MA there, and then went to George Washington Law School in D.C. For 3 years. And when I was in law school, a grad student I'd worked with at Notre Dame was at the Brookings Institute and introduced me to the federal co-chairman of the Southwest Border Regional Commission that Jimmy Carter had created. And Reagan dissolved. There was like half a dozen regional commissions that Carter created and we were working on an economic development master plan for the U.S.-Mexico border region. And along with that, I helped them explore programs to attract reverse foreign investment into the U.S. So BMW, Volvo started, and then Toyota was out in the Northwest. So I worked on those, and at the end of my second year of law school, I got an internship in the White House in the General Counsel's office at OMB, and I was working on a case book on the Federal Privacy Act and all the cases interpreting that and how that works. And since then, the Department of Justice has expanded that into a huge multi-volume set. But after that, I did an internship with the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. And we were working on the Chrysler bailout, the Alaskan pipeline, and the deregulation of the savings and loan industry. And I did that. A dozen years later, I wound up representing the Resolution Trust Corporation to take over all the assets of the defaulted savings and loans. Then finally, my last internship was in the Treasury Department with the Mint, and they were getting sued for switching to a zinc penny instead of copper. And then I graduated. Reagan was cutting jobs in D.C., and Henry Cisneros ran for mayor, and in his first term decided he wanted to create jobs in San Antonio. So I thought, I guess now's a good time to go home. So I came home and began practicing law here. I got a job in the city attorney's office, and I was there for 6 years and got into state and local public law and handled the city's small business development program. But in the course of that, got involved in the city's bond projects, the tax-exempt bond financings. There were a half dozen different local issuers that the state authorized to be created to issue tax-exempt bonds for a variety of different public purposes. So I did that,
So Bill,
okay.
we'll come back and just want to get Francisco.
Oh, sorry.
So Francisco, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Thanks, Bill. First, let me start by thanking the NADBank for their invitation to be in this panel. I'm Francisco Barnés. I am the Executive Director of WRI. WRI is the World Resources Institute. It's an environmental think tank that has global presence. We are in 12 countries. We've been around for 40 years now. We are focused in trying to come up with solutions in 3 systems, the energy system, the cities, food, land, and water, and the intersections between them. In Mexico, we've been around for about 20 years. We started as a Centro de Transporte Sustentable, which was very much focused on transport, mobility. We were around working together with back then Environmental Minister of Mexico City and today our current President Claudia Sheinbaum on the first BRT in Mexico, the first Metrobus. And since then, we worked on scaling that up, working with a ProTram system. Later on, we became part of WRI, and then we expanded our work to energy transition, to water resilience, to ecosystem conservation. But our main work is to try to influence different stakeholders, to try to influence policymakers by bringing rigor to policymaking, analytical tools, and so on. We also work with the private sector. We work very closely on trying to come up with new innovative financial models that will scale up investment in sustainability issues. We really believe in public-private partnerships, and we are committed to pushing sustainability. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you, Francisco. Let me ask our panel, and I'll start with you, Rebecca, to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you're seeing in New Mexico when it comes to urban development.
Thanks, Paul. It's such a big question, so many different directions to go. But there's a couple of things that I really want to hit on that I think are certainly pronounced in New Mexico and also not unique to us throughout the region. One is the range of types of communities and level of development that we have. Sort of our baseline and starting point is so diverse. We have colonias and tribal communities and other small rural communities that don't even yet have the infrastructure that we've had in most cities going back 60 or 70 years. So we have some communities that are starting out today behind. And then we have, in New Mexico, we have some of the most incredible technological advancement spaces in the country with two of our National Department of Energy labs, really incredible and innovative research institutions, which I know isn't unique to us throughout the region. And so we have all these technological advancements and opportunities to do things better and smarter. So the challenge for us on any given day is to not just balance livability with urban development in the urban spaces, but to balance our investments in urban spaces with the incredible needs of all of our other communities, urban, rural, and everything in between. So that's one. Another key challenge when we think about our urban spaces, our communities, and where people live and work and play is the realities of climate change that we're facing, that we're already experiencing. And the governor came into office 6.5 years ago with a vision to develop a 50-year water plan for the state of New Mexico. And the first step was digging into the science. And our scientists, our climate scientists in New Mexico, looked at all of the literature, and they came up with the scientific conclusion that 50 years from now in the state of New Mexico, we'll have 25% less water than we do today. So what are we going to do today to prepare our communities for 25% less water? How does that inform what we're doing? It's an incredible challenge, but the lead scientist, Nelia Dunbar, who led that research, said to me something I will never forget, which is that globally, with climate change, when you think about water, there's going to be places that have way too much and places that have not nearly enough. So with climate change globally, when we talk about water, we're talking about extremes. And Dr. Dunbar said, I, for one, would rather be in a place that has less, because there's more we can do proactively and with technology and with smart investments and with infrastructure to prepare for less water. It's harder when you're navigating the stresses and that come with more water. And of course, we have extreme flooding that comes with drought, that comes with the territory. So that's the second area of challenge. And it's not just the water scarcity and increased flooding and wildfires and disasters, but the extreme heat. We expect to see a 5% temperature increase in Las Cruces and Doña Ana County in southern New Mexico. And so that creates challenges and opportunities for our communities. And quickly, the third one that I wanted to touch on is just kind of the challenge in development and infrastructure. I think that's probably shared across the board, which is getting the right funding to the right projects at the right time. That alignment is so difficult, right? And when you can get those things to match up, I've never seen it be easy or a coincidence. It takes so much work to line up the right funding with the right project at the right time. And the thing right now with how many of our communities throughout the US-Mexico region have aging infrastructure, deferred maintenance, the needs are so great at the same time as we have all these technological advancements. And as we've already heard today, there's never enough money to do it all. So you're always choosing, you're always prioritizing. So lining up the project priorities and making those investments in a way that's grounded in community, grounded in local needs and perspectives is, I think, the part of this work that is daily the most challenging and also the most inspiring, because when we get that solved, when we get those pieces to line up, it propels us to do it again and again.
Terrific, thank you. Gonzalo, you're a housing developer and a very successful one. Tell us what your challenges are.
Well, we have a presence in 11 different states in Mexico. We recently increased our diversification because we had an interesting acquisition just last December. We acquired another public company, and we became the largest in Mexico and top 3 in Latin America. But these 11 states in Mexico are very different because Mexico is a a pretty big country, so we have different weathers, different soils, so we have different regulations in all of these local markets. And as we are land developers and home builders, so we integrate all these two businesses in one. We have very long-term investments. These investments include many water infrastructures, such as water treatment plants. We also build lagoons and wells that return the water to the underground wells. The majority of our water source in Mexico is underground. So for us, that is very important. A challenge in that sense, we have had some states that don't authorize this type of investments. So that's a challenge to overtake with more collaborations with the local governments. Also, in the north, we have presence in Tijuana, in Monterrey, and in Tamaulipas, in Reynosa. In Monterrey, the company that we acquired, which is Haber, it's very relevant in that market, also in Tamaulipas. And in some of these developments, we include solar cells in the roofs, as you do also in the States. But we have a challenge on the low-income part, where even though solar equipment have decreased a lot in cost, it's still the energy of low-income housing is highly subsidized. So still it's not feasible to include this type of equipment. And even though in Vinte we have analyzed different ways to implement solar energy in these homes, which may be through solar farms, but still we have not got there yet. But as a highly innovation and sustainability company, we hope to get there soon.
Thank you. Bill, in your storied career, and I can imagine you probably have a few more things to add to your resume, but if you had to think now about one thing that is just the biggest headache, the biggest challenge that you're facing right now in urban development, what would you pick?
Basically, it's kind of a challenge and a blessing. The demand is so great. There's so much more demand and need for infrastructure and housing and public facilities. And we have built those over the years, over the decades, with state and local bonds. I mean, it's a public finance. The federal government has subsidized that, and the state governments have developed practices, tax practices, that have also subsidized that. But there's less and less appetite for governmental subsidies on infrastructure. Yesterday, a Republican congressman introduced a bill to take away the tax exemption on state and local bonds. And so it's those kinds of things. The needs are there. The other is, because we used to do, one of the areas of tax exempt financing is private activity bonds, and those are facilities that are issued for a public purpose, but that are owned and operated by a private party, a non-governmental party. And when we started a dozen years ago with the El Paso Housing Authority, the applications for a private activity reservation were undersubscribed, and today they're oversubscribed. I mean, there was, in the last few years, there's been over 300 applications for billions of dollars that are 1/10 of the amount available. So it's the reducing appetite for governments to subsidize projects, the huge demand you have. And so we're having to navigate our ways through that. And there's some strategies we've come up with to be able to handle some of that. But it's the demand creates its own problem.
That's fascinating. Francisco, your think tank is on kind of the cutting edge of thinking about some of these challenges and coming up with solutions. Anything that you'd like to share with us about your challenge?
Yes, of course. I mean, if you look at what has happened in Mexico, I would say certainly when you look at it from the urban perspective, urban sprawl and irrational urban expansion within most cities explain most of the problems we face today. If you go back on the day, at some point, housing policy was the only urban policy that we had with terrible results. We had the government purchasing land in the periphery of the cities, very cheap land, investing and subsidizing developers, and what that brought was a huge expansion of the cities. Many grew 20x, 15x. I mean, you just need to look at Querétaro, Aguascalientes, Toluca, even many of the states within the border, with the cities within the border, look at Tijuana. Obviously, this expansion, even though the land was cheap, the cost of living for the people that were there was extremely high because you didn't have access to services. The state had to invest tons of money to take transport, and there's no public transport investment enough to cover a 20x expansion. Now imagine energy supply, water supply, the issues involved with air quality with a situation like that. As I said, the border is not the exception. Many cities you look at Tijuana, you look at Reynosa, the density is quite small. The cities have grown. And then add to that migration, add to that the whole business development for exports, to the whole maquiladoras and so on and so on. And then what you end up having is a place like Tijuana, where only 35% of the total urban development is close to the center. You go to Reynosa and it's only 25%. Add to that climate change and the issues surrounding extreme heat. Right now, just this year, the temperature anomaly, for example, in Monterrey or in Mexicali, was about 1.5 degrees centigrade above the average temperature we had ever experienced. Obviously, that has also an impact on droughts. We have four out of the 6 states in the border that have extreme water scarcity. If you look at water availability per capita, in the last 20 years, it has decreased by 20% in the border. Add to that social-related issues. If with a situation like that, in a place like Tijuana, for example, the lowest income segments have like 12 times less access to services such as like medical services or public spaces. You look at the cost of transport in terms of the total budget for a family, lowest income segment, 12% of their total income, highest income segment, 4% of the total income. Add to that environmental implications. I mean, the urban sprawl has created deforestation in a place like Monterrey, close to 30,000 hectares, with the corresponding effects on climate. So, I mean, there's so many issues to tackle, but if there's one we need to tackle first, is we need to contain city growth.
Rebecca, just picking up on exactly what Francisco was saying, it sounds very similar to the many challenges that New Mexico is facing. In the context of urban development, with the challenges that have been mentioned, what does the future hold in terms of what are the next steps that need to be undertaken in order to deal with these circumstances?
Yeah, this is the fun part, right? We get to talk about what we can do about it. And none of it's easy, but we do have options, we do have solutions. And so in New Mexico, I'll start with some of what we're doing to address the density of populations and sprawl and things like that. And this touches a number of different sectors of infrastructure investment. On the transportation side, it requires us to think about the experience of the driver, of the commuter, of the mom dropping her kids off at school, to think about multimodal options and investments. Where can we do more strategically with transit-oriented development, which in New Mexico, we are a bit behind the curve in terms of really maximizing effective use of transit and public transit to help people get around. We are also investing in decarbonizing our transportation sector. We heard a lot about electrification of the transportation sector on the earlier panel. That's a key area, and also completely agree with the comments from the earlier panelists about needing to make sure that you're building out the infrastructure to support the vehicle investments that you're pushing and making. That's essential. So you have to be smart about it. And so we're doing that and building out a statewide public EV charging network. And that's along with trying to encourage school districts to switch to electric school buses, bringing an electric school bus manufacturer into the Santa Teresa area. Thank you, Secretary Black. We're thinking about air quality. We're thinking about the practical considerations that add to or detract from quality of life. So that's one thing. On the water side, we know that, I already said, we're looking at 25% less water. So we know that our communities are going to be continually water constrained. That doesn't mean that they have to be water stressed. And so we're making investments through a number of priorities in the governor's 50-year water action plan to help conserve the water that we have. We have a set of priorities for that. To advance new water sources, so a real huge push to do some catch up in the state of New Mexico on desalinating brackish water at inland desal plants. We've got $40 million that just opened yesterday for grants and contracts to do brackish desalination in the state of New Mexico. That is directly tied to community development and economic growth that then feeds more investment back into those communities. And we're really leaning in on affordable housing because we have, as do, I think this is at least in the US, a nationwide issue and something that we share with our partners in Mexico, is that there's just fundamentally, it's too expensive to live in far too many places in our communities. And so the state has made really big strides. The last 2 years combined, around $275 million of new state money going into affordable housing projects. And some of that is helping to get projects started where there otherwise would only be a vision on a whiteboard. Other places, we're using some of those dollars to complete projects, to round out the capital stack and get projects fully funded so that they can get across the finish line, with the goal of adding, just in projects announced last week, 1,500 more affordable and attainable housing units in key areas, including Las Cruces. So there's a number of ways that we're coming at it, and then I want to bring it back to community engagement really quickly on this point around what the future looks like. And I think in government, I've been in government for about 20 years, we aren't always that good at listening to folks, especially the folks who are up close with their own experience, their own culture, their own connection to a place. And thankfully, I think we're doing better. We need to continue to try to do better. In New Mexico, we've taken a page out of President Biden's playbook of emphasizing the importance of community benefit plans as we're making big investments. If we're going to spend millions of dollars on a project, let's check in first with the folks who are going to live in and around and hopefully benefit from that project. So a community benefit plan is a model to hardwire listening and community input into infrastructure project planning and development and housing development. So we're doing that with a new $200 million community benefit fund that was enacted in state this year to advance climate resilience projects. So clean energy, clean transportation, workforce development. There's a community engagement requirement in that state law. We also, in the strategic water supply that's advancing desal projects, if a private company is going to come in and partner with the state and get the benefit of public dollars to advance their private sector desalination project, they also have to do a community benefit plan before they get to take advantage of those public investments for their project. So we're really, I think the future looks like more informed engagement. And here's the kicker, without slowing things down. That's where we have to find that balance and continue to strive to listen and also to make sure we keep things moving and don't let projects stall out by lack of initiative and taking time to move through those important engagement steps. So that's a balancing act that we're continuing to try and calibrate here in the state of New Mexico.
Yeah, tremendous. I'm so pleased that you mentioned community engagement and private-public partnerships as part of the solution. Asking you, Gonzalo, you and I were speaking before we came up on the dais, and you were telling me a lot about how the design of your projects and your housing projects are focused on infrastructure, community health, community engagement, and community benefit as a result of having to deal with a hotter world. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've implemented in your projects that help that community?
Yeah, so since the beginning, we were focused on how to create value on our communities and our clients and the families. And it's very common in Mexico in order to get the construction permits, you need to build all this infrastructure and donate it to the municipality. So this infrastructure has to do with parks, schools, roads, everything you need before you can build a home on top of the land. And so many developers back then used to decide on put the parks on the side, put the school very far, not caring about what happens, focusing on the business just financially. And that's how Vinte was born. Identifying that this was a model with a high risk, because eventually this would impact these businesses, and it did. Right? We had a sector-specific crisis, which was based on a change on a subsidies program in Mexico, and there were 3 companies that were very concentrated on these subsidies, and they were out of business. So that's why we are focused into decreasing risk and a long-term value creation business model. In Mexico, after all this problem that happened back in 2013, the problem has been that there is no a good level of construction of homes. Back in 2007, in Mexico, there were being built around 700,000 homes in the country. Currently, we have only around 130,000 homes in the whole country. So we are in very historic lows. But the formal workforce has increased double in 20 years. In 2005, we were 12 million workers. Currently, we are over 22 million workers. How home prices are increasing constantly, twice as inflation. So it's complicated to have a scenario that is healthy with these increasing prices. So what there has been a lack of is equity investments in our sector, long-term debt, and this is why the new federal government has has found this problem on the housing deficit and put in an objective of 1 million new homes in these 6 years, and also increasing the objective by 600,000 more homes. So they are identifying this huge problem because it's a social problem not to have a basic need, which is somewhere to live. So hopefully we find good investment frameworks to attract investors, in institutional investment in Mexico for home building. In Vinte, well, we have worked in the capital markets since 2016. We did our IPO. We have had equity subscriptions as a public company with development banks from France and Denmark. Just last year, we did another capital increase on equity and debt to do the acquisition of Haber. In the debt part, we had participation of IFC and 2 other local banks, Actinver and BBVA. And on the equity side, we had the French Development Bank, the Denmark one also, pension funds from Mexico, and other family offices as investors in Vinte. And so we're trying to do our part into attracting more institutional investment in our sector, and hopefully we can grow the home production in Mexico, which is highly needed.
Again, that private investment is so important in working with the government in these complex situations. To have a public-private partnership seems to be working quite well. Bill, you're a problem solver. You solve problems for your clients all the time. Give us a problem that you've solved recently, and how did you do it?
Well, there's a couple of them. But, the first one was El Paso Housing Authority asked us to work with them to participate in a new program that HUD had created. And to kind of take you back a little bit, public housing started in the Depression because nobody had a place to live. So the federal government just built housing. And then they didn't want federal employees all over the United States. So they asked the states to create housing authorities, and the HUD would contract with the housing authority to run the projects, but they were all HUD owned. It was low-income housing because actually everybody was low income in the United States at the time. But over the years, I mean, this goes back to the 30s, and then 40s and 50s and 60s, 70s, there was more public housing built. And HUD looked at it and said, you know, we really need to upgrade these. And they estimated that it would take a $200 billion congressional appropriation to give the housing authorities the money to fix up all their public housing. And they said, you know what? There's these low-income housing tax credit programs in the tax-exempt bond markets. And what if we just gave the housing authorities permission to sell off HUD's housing to a private investor group? And so we did that, but we set it up and sold it to a private limited partnership. But the managing general partner was a nonprofit subsidiary of the housing authority. So they're still running all the apartments. And in the process, we were able to raise $2 billion in El Paso to fix up their entire housing stock of public housing. And if you go to El Paso today, the nicest apartments in El Paso used to be public housing. And so the first deal we did was $125 million in tax-exempt bonds. It got $120 million of tax credits that came in as equity. So you had a $240 million project that only had $60 million worth of debt on it. And so that helps the project cash flow. That came out to about $79,000 a unit, because we did like 1,600 units in 15 properties. We did another one several years later that had 60 units, and that came out to $190,000 a unit, because you don't have the economies of scale that you get from bundling all of those. So I talked to the housing authority. I'm like, you know, we could do this all up and down the Rio Grande. And I got a call from superintendent at Fort Davis Independent School District in Jeff Davis County. And I had done a teacherage, which is teacher apartments, for Presidio ISD. And they said, we need a teacher. Can you come talk to us? So I went and talked to them and asked them, well, how many apartments do you need? And they were like, I don't know, 6. I'm like, okay, you're not gonna find a lot of developers interested in building 6 houses. But there are, within 30 minutes of the school district, 6 other school districts. There's Sol Ross's out there. The UT system has a McDonald's Observatory. There's state parks. And all of those people need housing. The El Paso Workforce Board said, hey, we're interested in that. So we're putting together for them an interlocal cooperation program that all these local governments can cooperate and say, we need this, and we're trying to get that up to at least 50. I'd like to get it up to 100 apartments. And all, those would be within 30 minutes of their drive to work, even though it's not in the school district. I told them it takes me 30 minutes to drive to work in San Antonio. So we could do that, and so that's one of the things we're working through, is to put that together. So through interlocal cooperation, and I'll tell you, when the city wanted an Alamo Dome, or wanted a dome stadium, they only had the city tax base. So we put together an interlocal cooperation agreement with the Transit Authority, which is countywide, and we're able to tap into the countywide sales tax. And we built the Alamo Dome for cash and paid it off in 5 years. So through the interlocal cooperation, you can stretch those resources and spread it out to affect more people, cheaper.
Well, bravo. Yeah, congrats on that. Francisco, you mentioned a lot of problems, a lot of issues that you're facing and the country's facing. What gives you hope? Where do you see the progress to be made?
Let me tell you where do I see hope. Even though the cities are a great part of the problem, a great part of our environmental problem, they're also a great part of the solution. Right now, with solutions that we already understand, with technologies that already exist, we could pretty much get to net zero by 2050 in Mexican cities. Obviously, that needs a lot of investment. Obviously, that needs a lot of work in getting compact, connected, and efficient cities. We need to start by looking at underutilized space within the cities, parking lots, abandoned buildings, and so on and so on, to develop public, affordable housing equipped with local parks, with all the cobertura vegetal, and so on, that can also help regulate temperature. Look, I'm going to give you an example, Monterrey. Monterrey is an industrial city. You have in the center of the city some of the factories, the industrial facilities, whereas people live in the outskirts of the city. It's a complete counterintuitive thing. We need to move industry away to the periphery of the city, and we need to bring people back. In order to do that, we cannot do that from one day to the next. But we can certainly look into what of the industrial complexes do not represent already a significant part of the income for the companies, that have already been depreciated, that are close to their end of life, where we can negotiate with the private sector. Those would be the perfect candidates to move away. We can go clean up the sites and then use that space for developers to make a buck, and at the same time use part of that space for public housing. That's an example of things we could do. Transport-oriented development. We are working right now con la Agencia Ferroviaria in Mexico. As you know, Mexico has the intention of developing passenger trains. There is right now a project from Saltillo to the border to take people by train. So what we've been doing is looking into Saltillo, using the infrastructure for the train to look at interurban smaller trains that can derive people from public transport, from transporte de personal, into a clean way of transportation that at the same time can be el ancla or to do transport-oriented development. I mean, you could develop the city around the tracks of the train that are go through exactly the center of the city. Energy transition. One of the biggest problems within the cities in Mexico is that there's no access to cooling. Yes, we have access to energy, cheap energy, subsidized energy, but nobody can afford, or most of the lowest income sectors cannot afford ACs. Because if you get an AC, then your demand goes up, and then you also go to a higher tariff level. So what can you do? You can do decentralized energy. Decentralized energy to bring ACs. This is something that the Ministry of Energy is pushing, and we're trying to help with pilots in Mexicali. Distributed energy for new industrial parks in the border. All of this is the way we need to start thinking development in Mexico, but we need to start doing projects at scale that we can prove they are successful to move and do them, replicate them in other parts of the country.
I agree with you. Projects at scale are a wonderful way to make sure that you can do one and then build it on the next one. So that's a fantastic idea. We only have a few minutes left, and so I'm going to ask you to see if you can sum up with one thought that you would leave our audience with today. Just one thought that is that you're working on or it would make their project successful. So I'll start, as always, with you, Rebecca. Tell us what you would suggest or the piece of advice that you would give.
Well, I don't know how revelatory this is going to be for the folks here, but I'm going to bring up the anonymous quote that has guided me since I took on this infrastructure role, which is, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And so that drives a change mindset, a growth mindset. And going back to our first keynote speaker, Dr. Alarcon, to this morning, she gave some impressive statistics about bureaucratic streamlining in Mexico. That's changing the way we do things is not just about what we're doing, meaning let's take advantage of new technology, let's build smarter, let's build more resilient communities, but it's also how are we doing it. And the last little nugget is that 2 weeks ago, I was at a groundbreaking for what will be a new interchange off of Interstate I-25 in Los Lunas, New Mexico. It was 24 years in the making to get to a groundbreaking. They'll now be under construction for a couple of years. So if, I'm just using that as an example, if we're okay with a transportation project taking 24 years, let's keep doing what we're doing. That's great. If we would like those transportation projects to happen for our communities in less time, let's figure out what we want to get done. Let's get underneath it and align ourselves with whatever we need to fix and tweak and shift in order to get where we need to go.
Thank you. In California, we wouldn't know about projects that take 20 years.
No, I'm sure it's it's unique to us. Yes.
Gonzalo, give us, in 1 minute or so, give us one piece of advice.
I mean, many issues we have in Mexico and many regions, but I would guess we should learn a lot from what you do here in the U.S. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration between public and private entities, different in every state, but easier to implement in Mexico because it's more federal managed. But I would say more collaboration, more pushing for more sustainability financial products. For us in Vinte, we have issued sustainability bonds, social and green bonds, which means that we measure all the impact that we make through our investments, and we certify the homes through a relevant tool, which is EDGE, with 20% or 40% energy savings. So hopefully pushing for more sustainable investments.
Okay, great. Bill, I know what your piece of advice is going to be. It's going to be hire a great lawyer.
They can help you cooperate. one of the things I've seen that's been very helpful is interlocal cooperation between units of local government and, well, and the state government. And you get more bang for the buck. And we did, the city and the college district, each one had a 25-meter pool right across the street from each other. And I told them, what if you put your $4 million together? And they built a 50-meter with a diving platform, built to Olympic specs, natatorium for $8 million instead of having two 25-meter pools across the street. And so you get those things. But you also seen partnerships with nonprofit organizations, charitable organizations, charitable mission. Sometimes it's very consistent with the governmental purpose of a governmental entity. So I put them together, and they perform the governmental function on behalf of the governmental entity, and they subsidize the 501c3's facilities. And so it's those kinds of things, and then just the public-private partnerships with just private entities. I mean, there's a way to structure those, and there's a way to do that just gets you so much more than anybody could get by themselves. I don't know.
Thank you, Bill. And Francisco, you get to give us our final thought of the day.
I think you need to internalize equity and social justice criteria together with climate science into urban planning. And with climate science, you start by understanding water availability. We cannot continue to develop housing without access to water. We cannot continue to develop industry without access to water. So I think if you internalize at least those two concepts into urban planning, we'll be better off.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to thank the panel for a wonderful discussion, and thank all of you. Thank you. Everybody has a book.